Kate Mila-Falcha, welcome to Irish Granny Helen. It's time for our Saturday book, and we're on video number 3, The Rule of Crime and Me, an intimate view of Anne Rule, shared by her friend for 30 years, Anne Jaeger. So this is video number 3. This book is purely indulgent on my part because she's one of my very favorite writers, my favorite crime writer for sure. So where we left off, the last video, we were starting chapter 19, and we had been talking about the Diane Downs case, which really was a huge seller. Where did I put the book? Oh, God. For Anne Rule. And funny enough, I was aware of it because I read her book and Small Sacrifices, which I think I put the book downstairs already. I'm sorry. I did show it to you last time. I was surprised when I read this book to be told that the Diane Downs case really didn't get a whole lot of attention nationally. If you were a fan of Anne Rule, you knew about it, but not everybody in the world is a gigantic fan of Anne Rule's, but we're going to change that. However, in 2010, the TV show 2020 revisited Diane Downs. And then 2020 came back to the story again in 2019. Elizabeth Vargas, one of the 2020 show's hosts, said that Jaeger, the author of the book, who was a TV investigative reporter and who interviewed Diane Downs for that documentary, Elizabeth Vargas said that Jaeger's interview really helped Diane Downs dig her own grave. Which, yeah, I hope you've watched it. If you haven't watched it, go on YouTube and type in Diane Downs interview, and it's about a half an hour, and you will see the author of this book when she was young talking to Diane Downs. Mostly you'll hear Diane Downs as Elizabeth Vargas says, digging her own grave. The local reaction in 1984 to this documentary interview was very positive. In court, there was a change in atmosphere when she would come into the courtroom to sit, Anne Jaeger. The jury had been sequestered. They didn't know about this, but the spectators certainly were aware that this young woman, friend of Anne Rule, had done this remarkable interview. And they finally published it, after the jury was selected, because they didn't want to taint the jury, which I think is very interesting. And the media could see that that there was something going on with Anne Rule and Anne Jaeger, the author, because this was the moment when they had the confrontation in court. Well, it wasn't really a confrontation, but Anne Jaeger, young and sort of, feeling herself, approached Anne Rule's daughter and said, well, you're not in the media. You can't sit here. And that's how she became friends with Anne Rule. So Jaeger and Anne became close friends during this whole trial. And she took Anne to, she took her to let her see her, do the whole half-hour interview. It was on tape and nobody else had seen it yet, and she let Anne see it. So Anne was fascinated. She said this was a real glimpse at the genuine personality of Diane Downs. You have to watch it. It is so creepy. So in 1987, the book Small Sacrifices came out, and along with The Stranger Beside Me about Ted Bundy, these were her 2 most popular books. Chapter 20, The Verdict Rules. So the jury in the Diane Downs case was out for 3 days in June of 84. The length of deliberation made everybody nervous about the verdict. They were afraid, oh my God, is this jury going to be deadlocked? But the jury reached the decision at midnight of the 3rd day. They stayed at it till midnight. And they brought it right to court. They didn't wait till the next day. And so there was this electric atmosphere in the courtroom. Later, Anne was a big supporter. When another reporter used Jaeger's documentary to get attention and awards. So what happened is, naively, the author who made the documentary interview with Diane Downs, Anne Jaeger, let somebody use her stuff, and they gave her no credit. They took full credit for it. It was really sad, and then won awards, which is really bad. Anne Rule told her, just keep doing your work. Just keep doing the right thing. Keep doing your work. She was experienced in misogyny. Jaeger also had to deal with the misogyny that people were saying she was hired for her looks and not her skill. Diane Downs had written a paper on the long-term effects of child mistreatment, and it really gives an insight into how her mind works. She had, been in school, and she linked it generationally to hatred of parents and the desire to make someone, excuse me, to enjoy watching somebody scream and cry. She said that there was a vicious cycle in the relationship between parent and child that get passed down generationally. She exhibited some insight, but had no control to stop the cycle. Diane talked about being trapped by society in a male-dominated world, and she really made a lot of vitriolic comments about men. She hated men. Anne was sure to give Jaeger credit for the interview that others wouldn't give her. She always went out of her way to point out, this is the young woman who did that interview. Anne was used to men disregarding the work of women. She had worked with plenty of cops, law enforcement, lawyers, that kind of thing. Chapter 21, Love Letters Between Bars. In June of 84, behind bars, pregnant and awaiting a life plus 50 years sentence, Downs was held in the county jail until she gave birth. On July 16th of 84, Jaeger got a letter from Randy Woodfield, the I-5 killer. And he said to her, he was one of the deadliest serial killers in American history. He was serving life plus 90 years in the Oregon State Penitentiary. And he said to her, I'm getting married to a lady who will make headlines. I'm offering you the story. So, So Jaeger got copies of the letter from the prison. So this guy wrote this letter, and of course the prison read everything going in and out for the inmates. And they notified Anne Jaeger, this guy's nuts. So apparently Diane Downs was the blushing fiance, and Anne Jaeger printed a story about this, and it infuriated Romeo, the serial killer. His first letter to Downs, he wrote to her under a false name. Downs didn't know who she was hearing from. He was really nasty in his letters about Anne Rule, because Anne Rule had written about him, and she was working on this book about Diane. And so he's kissing up to this fresh new inmate that he's got, trying to manipulate. He wrote all kinds of nasty, suggestive stuff that I can't talk about here. But he also said really creepy things about children and marriage. 5 days before her verdict, he told Diane Downs his real name. And he proposed to her 1 week after her guilty sentence. Diane wanted this romantic, emotional connection, and he wanted conjugal visits. So he warned her that Rule would make her look like a killer. He warned her that, Anne Rule's writing this book about you and she's a terrible person. And I'm going to sue Anne Rule, he says to Diane Downs. And he did file a $12 million libel suit. And lost it. Jaeger, the author of the book, she quit her station she was working for because they wouldn't let her cover Woodfield's media conference at the state prison. He called a news conference, and the attitude of the station was, this is just feeding into all this and we don't want any part of it. So in a week after she quit, she negotiated with them and she got her job back. Diane Downs soon had her baby. She had a baby girl. And, Children's Services came and took the baby away. That was the end of that. And she just was completely unemotional about it. There's a really interesting, I don't know if it's a 2020 or Dateline, really interesting one of those shows that interview at great length this baby girl all grown up. Really sad. Anyway, she was taken back to jail the same night, and she wrote a goodbye letter to Woodfield with 8 Bible discussions for him to study up on, and she made no mention of the baby at all. She was professionally evaluated as a psychopath and a sociopath. Woodfield, eventually, he lost interest because there wasn't any money in the relationship. He was hoping that publicity and everything, he'd get some money out of being involved with her, but that all fell apart. So now we're on chapter 22, Girls Trip. After the book Small Sacrifices came out, Anne Rule and Ann Jaeger went to Jaeger's family's beach cabin on the Oregon coast. And that was a whole short chapter. That's really the only thing. They just described the cabin on the coast. Chapter 23, Quiet on the Set. Making Small Sacrifices into a movie, they got Farrah Fawcett to play Diane Downs. I'm sure Diane Downs loved that. Jaeger played herself. She got to be in the movie as herself, the reporter. She said she got worn out with too many takes. She could never be on, in a movie or on television because it was just really excruciating to do the same thing over and over and over and over. Her nightmare was to be portrayed in a movie. Remember, she had that nightmare about her Diane Downs' children in the car and the bloody hand on the window. And so she had this movie and had this nightmare, and the people making the movie heard about it and decided to incorporate it into the movie so that there's a scene where you see a bloody hand on the rear car window. It didn't really happen in real life. It only happened in Ann Jaeger's nightmare. But Anne Rule went to the director and said, look, you're taking advantage of this young woman's nightmares. This is very traumatic. It didn't really happen in real life, and you should not include it. And she got it removed for her. She advocated for her because Jaeger was having PTSD over all of this. Anne had written screenplays when her sons were young. Remember, she stayed at the Ambassador Hotel, but she quit because she didn't like the time away from her children. Jaeger was really chilled, she said, on the set, watching Farrah Fawcett sort of channel Diane Downs. She said she became Diane, manipulative, dramatically, and diabolically manipulative. She mentions the moment in court when I'd forgotten about this. Okay. So Downs' narrative of what happened to these children as they were being shot. She'd gotten out of the car to confront the shaggy-haired stranger, and he tried to steal her car keys from her hand. There was a struggle, and he shot into the car and shot at her. And she remembers describing the background music coming off the tape deck in the car as the song Hungry Like a Wolf. But what was so weird about it, and so much of a lie, was that the tape wouldn't play if the keys were not in the ignition. That story is a lie. So the prosecutor brought in a tape of Hungry Like a Wolf and played it in court. And Jaeger said it was really unreal to see Diane Downs bebopping in court to the music. She said it was bizarre and frightening. And Downs said at the time that song has no bad memories for me. Jaeger remembered the filming fondly, especially the food. They provide food every day for the cast and crew, and she remembered that. She really liked Edmonton. It was filmed in Canada. So this was Anne's first book and Rule's first book to be made into a TV movie, and she studied the process and eventually became executive producer for other movies on her books. She learned how to do that. Chapter 24, Sitting with Killers. So Anne wrote Stranger Beside Me to put Ted Bundy behind her, but instead, the book was such a hit and he was such an obsession that he became a part of her life for the rest of her life. She said, they'll be asking me about Ted in the old folks' home, and that's exactly what happened. Anne's research was usually investigators' notes when she was writing a book, forensic files, witness testimony. She went to many trials. She went to all the trials of people she wrote about. She talked at length with family and friends and almost never spoke with the killers at all. She didn't center the killers at all, except the story of Ted Bundy. Although she really talked mostly about the victims, she could not avoid the fact that she knew him. She did talk to Diane Downs after her sentencing. She went in, had this interview, sat down with her, started to talk with her, and she cut it short. Anne Rule cut it short and left after 20 minutes. She said Diane would never tell the truth. There was no point in talking to her at all. Usually killers manipulate reporters and interviewers. They live in this strange alternate universe, and Jaeger describes the energy around Diane Downs as a sickly swirl that permeated the room. You could feel it. 40 years later, she said everything shows the depth of her mental illness. She's a walking mental disorder. And actually, this is a quote from the photographer who went with her to talk to her. He said, she's very personable. She's charming, Diane Downs. She's not stupid. She's articulate. But she played the room. He said it was watching a sociopath at work. He saw Diane Downs' final TV smirk as a sign of her confidence that she had convinced everyone of her lies. She certainly has a duper's delight, that psychopathic half smile. She's been diagnosed officially with histrionic personality disorder. Fewer than 2% of the population suffers from that. It's usually women. Her description of the crime is complete theatrics. It's all about herself, and she'll do whatever it takes to get what she wants. Highly manipulative. She killed her kids to get her ex-boyfriend back out of sympathy. He knew she was crazy and was trying to break up with her, and she didn't want to break up with him. And he told her, I can't handle kids. I don't want children. That was his excuse, right? And good, I'm rid of her. So she got rid of her children so he'd come back. She had no empathy. In this interview that Anne Jaeger did with her 40 years ago, this was the moment when I just went, oh my God. She says, some people say I'm lucky. I don't feel lucky. I couldn't tie my shoe for about 2 months because she had her arm in a cast. Her pain was incidental. Hold on a second. And then she says, I couldn't tie my shoe for 2 months. Then she says, it's very painful. If I'd been shot the way they were, we would have all died. I don't know what the logic there is. It's likely that her father is also sociopathic. 20% of people elicit the symptoms of sociopathy or psychopathology. 20% in families, family members. She compares Diane Downs to Susan Smith, who in 1994 sent her car into a lake with her children in it. So the comparison is, she says there's striking similarity between these two women. They were in their 20s when the crimes occurred. They took their vengeance out on their children. They trapped children in cars to commit murder. They blamed their crimes on an unknown assailant trying to carjack them. And they had just been rejected by lovers who didn't want children. There are a lot of similarities. She revisited Downs to talk about it, and Downs still denied that she'd done it. She said, I don't see the parallels when she gave her these comparisons. Jaeger asked Downs her reaction to knowing that those children drowned. And Diane Downs said, this is a quote, I have no reaction. It wasn't part of my life. Wow. Later, the cameraman told Jaeger that Downs took every opportunity to flirt with him and make eyes with him. That's so gross. He says, after he left, he says to her, I've never felt like I was in the presence of absolute pure evil, like a cloud or like a spirit or something around her. It was almost visual to me. That's not the only person who's mentioned there was sort of a miasma of evil around her. Jaeger felt it too. A malignant aura made her hair stand up on the back of her neck. He said, the photographer said, that he grew up in a religious home, but until he met Diane Downs, he said, I don't think I really believed in evil. He was an Iraqi war veteran who nearly died in the service. He'd seen a lot of things, but Diane Downs freaked him out. Chapter 25, Stalked by Killers. Anne was once contacted by the FBI because a prisoner that she wrote about tried to hire a hitman to get to her. Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, did his murders in a general area where Anne lived, and she had a contract to write about this unknown serial killer. Once again, they give her the job of writing about a killer that hasn't been identified yet. And when he was finally caught, and she actually realized she knew him too, I'd forgotten about this, he had come to a number of her public appearances and just sat and stared at her. He even mentioned her by name to investigators later. He wanted to know how to act while on trial, because of her books, how he should behave. Psychopaths need to take risks and control women and feel superior. And the authors who write about them have to be careful to protect their privacy. Chapter 26, Escaping the Truth. In 1987, Downs escaped. Oh, gosh. That's right. Downs escaped. Jaeger called the prosecutor who had adopted Downs' two children. This is Mr. Hoogie. And then she called Anne. She said that, Anne Rule, she said Hoogie is a great human being. He adopted the children to keep them safe and together. Diane scaled an 18-foot fence in the rec yard. This poor guy, Hoogie, sat in a chair with a shotgun in his lap until Diane was caught 10 days later. Can you imagine? They found her living with another inmate's husband. He claimed that she showed up at his door naked, and he let her in. They did, you know what? And she just stayed. Oh, God. Diane was put in solitary. She was transferred to the East Coast, and next, she was on Oprah. like, long distance interview. Ann Rule was flown to Chicago to be on Oprah. Diane was on stage via TV monitor. It was unbelievable. It really is unbelievable that they let her do that. That she loved the attention. So Oprah says to her, a lot of people don't understand how a mother could stand by and watch her 3 children get shot without being hysterical. And Downs' answer is, well, it wasn't like going to the baseball field and having popcorn and hot dogs. The audience murmured, not knowing what to make of the woman. Downs then changed her well-worn story that she told for 5 years to claim she had no memory of the shooting, implying she didn't know if she was hysterical or not. But Oprah had done her research. She said, so you don't remember trying to pull the gun away from him, fighting him, kicking him, screaming, yelling? Diane said, no, I don't remember that. Ann Rule interjects, you remember now pretending to throw the keys to trick the man? And she says, yes. Downs was glib, openly taunts Ann, ridiculing her, trying to get under her skin, but Ann remained calm, answering when she can get a word in edgeways. The audience is looking at Diane in disbelief with wide eyes, some giving her the side eye, and it's very bizarre little Oprah moment. Okay. Oprah had challenged Diane's casual delivery. She says, you tell this story like you're talking about going to the state fair. Chapter 27, signed, sealed, and delivered. All the evidence was kept after Downs' trial, but eventually it was burned. But the investigators did go through it and save a brass unicorn for Anne. And I can't believe I put that book away downstairs again. But in our last video, I showed you the book Small Sacrifices, and there's a unicorn on it. And that is the unicorn that Diane Downs had made and inscribed their children's names shortly before she killed them. It was signed by her to memorialize her love for her children. It was dated 6 days before the crime. She had taken the children on a trip to the coast that day, to the beach, and experts believe that that was the original day she planned to commit the crime, but she chickened out. Anne returned the unicorn to them when they ended the visit. So they came to her house, these investigators, and they brought her the unicorn. So she was polite and took it. But when they were leaving, she gave it back to them and said, I really don't want this in my house. Chapter 28, Faraway Freedom. So Jaeger kept in touch with Diane over the years through just a few letters over the years. In one, she chastises Jaeger, Downs chastises Jaeger for not telling the truth about Downs' case and about not being a good Leo, astrological, a good Leo. Downs said, I welcomed you so I could study you that day in your 1994 visit. Jaeger still attends all of Downs' parole hearings. Okay, I saw in this book that Jaeger mentioned that the next hearing was going to be in 2024 because this book was written a couple of years ago. So I stopped reading the book and I Googled it and I found out that they had just had her hearing on October 28th and 29th. And what's so interesting is I just started reading this book that same week, I think the 29th. Let me see. Did I write it down? Anyway, the same week that I started taking notes on the book, they started doing the hearing, parole hearing for her, and parole was denied. And she still claims her innocence. She still says that she still has a complete lack of remorse. The board was pretty horrified. And the full hearing is on YouTube, and it's just unbelievable. So to be paroled, you have to admit your guilt and have remorse and get extensive therapy and do positive steps to help society, and she wanted nothing. The record reflects she has had many escape tries in 87 and in 89, and she just denies it ever happened. I don't know why this is on my record. I didn't do that. She tried to escape from New Jersey in 1991. In 1994, she was transferred to Chowchilla, and she was caught having removed caulking around the window to try to eventually break out of that. So then she says, the board asked her about, was this evidence of an attempt to escape? And she says, oh, definitely. My appeal was denied. I lost without reason. The situation you're in has to be so bad you'll risk death. I was at a point where I didn't even care if I got shot going over the fence. I haven't felt that way since. She often called Ann Jaeger as a reason that she couldn't fully disclose the facts of her crime. She talked about all these weird conspiracy theories against her. She admitted to being paranoid about the people who were still after her. And she warned the parole board, kind of a threat to the parole board. She says, I fear for you, not for me, for you. If that makes me look crazy, I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry. These people are powerful and important that are coming to get the board. Even Ann Jaeger, who was there at the hearing, said she was concerned. Did Diane Downs think that Ann was tied to a criminal underground, or that her work that she'd done on Diane Downs' case was putting Diane Downs in danger? Was she going to arrange to have someone come after Ann Jaeger? And a board member asked the writer if she was still fearful. No, the board member asked Diane Downs, are you still fearful? And she said, I'm not fearful for me. But she explained she thought that the board members' lives were in danger. Weird. So there's a psychiatric report that says she's a low risk to strangers, but extremely high risk to intimate people in her life. She told the doctor that about her COVID mask. If I was a narcissist, I wouldn't be wearing a mask. It ruins my lipstick. And she still doesn't admit she shot her kids. It's still all about her. She says, that was the worst thing that happened to me in my life. I don't love myself. I don't know if I ever will or can, but I'm not going to denigrate myself to prove I hate myself. I think this is a clear case of Looney Tunes. Unbelievable. In 2020, she said, I failed my children by not keeping them safe. I was stupid. I lived a careless, foolish life. It was foolish to take them into my careless life. She had contacted Susan Atkins of the Manson family. And Atkins at the time was the longest serving inmate in a women's prison where Diane was housed. Downs told prison officials she intended to marry Susan's former husband, and she wrote to find out more about him from Atkins. Atkins wrote back and said that her ex is a con man. A board member said to Downs that with her experience, she should be able to discern that about people based on her past. And that Texas man had married Susan Atkins after all those murders. I mean, come on. They wondered why Downs would agree to correspond with or marry such a man, or even write to another infamous killer like Susan Atkins. And her answer was, I was not serious about marrying him. I wanted to know if the men writing to me were connected. I was playing the Texas man to find out. So she didn't marry Susan's ex. Atkins died of a brain tumor in 2009. The most chilling admission during the hearing, Downs blurted out, people who hate me don't hate me because I'm a baby killer. They hate me because I'm famous. Oh, good Lord. So Anne has not attended other hearings, but she's kept up to date about them. She said, you know, the crime that she did was just a gut punch into her eyes. Downs, after 42 years, tried for a new trial because her conviction of attempted murder and assault was voted guilty 10-2, and it didn't need to be unanimous. But then the law changed and said, well, that's unconstitutional. It has to be unanimous moving forward. But she wanted them to be retroactively to give her a new trial. But the murder vote was unanimous. So today, her daughter Christy is married and has 3 children, and she named her youngest daughter Cheryl. Her son Danny is paralyzed. He loves to fish. He works with computers. Prosecutor Hughie is, his home was threatened to be burned within feet of Oregon's biggest forest fire, but they managed to save it. Okay. Chapter 29, Rulemaker. So Anne was a huge advocate for VICAP. I didn't know this. She has done so much good for people. VICAP is the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. It was like a, what would you call it? It was this data bank where the FBI, they were doing an anti-serial killer type thing. And Anne had become really good friends with one of the FBI profilers, Pierce Brooks. He solved the 1963 Onion Field murders that Joseph Wambaugh wrote The Onion Field about. So he was called to consult in the Diane Downs case, and that's how Anne met him, and they became really friends. His nickname with the press, now his real name is Pierce Brooks. His nickname with the press was Fierce Looks, because he wasn't very friendly to reporters. He was always scowling at them. But he was able to accomplish a lot with no DNA and without the kind of technology we have today. He used his brain. His philosophy was honey gets more than vinegar. He worked the Atlanta child killings, the Chicago Tylenol murders, the Green River killing, and before computers, cell phones, security cameras, DNA, or forensic genealogy. He was trying to create a national database to track serial killers. He was one of the earliest to say, serial killers are not crazy. He said they're manipulative, they're charming, they're cool under stress. They like control, like with kidnapping and stuff. They like getting away with random murders and doing it again. That was a novel concept, that there were people that liked to do that. They stalked, hunted, and killed. They were predators. And Anne worked with him to help create VICAP. This was the database, and she had decades of experience documenting these crimes. She had all kinds of information. She was one of the first to see the similarity in these type of killers' crimes. This was a new approach, connecting crimes by how things were done. Now, this is not necessarily completely believed anymore. It is, but it isn't. But this is what she said in those days. A serial killer strikes in waves. A serial killer might murder a woman, a man, or a child once a year and then break after the impulse was satiated. Then his obsession builds and he kills again to release the rage. Sometimes murdering daily or even twice a day as his confidence grew. Psychopaths acted without remorse or guilt and were completely vicious. So she was instrumental in helping people to understand the patterns of, these psychopathic killers. But they don't necessarily believe anymore that once you killed somebody, you're always going to want to go back and do it again and again and again. They know now that that's not true. Before what I just read, before that was common knowledge, serial killers were not caught because nobody ever bothered to connect the crimes, and people didn't know to connect the crimes. And Anne Rule pointed out the increase in the percentage of random stranger killings, but it's because of the compilation of data nationwide. It was groundbreaking. The states and the feds could collaborate. Up till then, up till that moment, most cops were possessive with their evidence. They didn't want to share information. But Brooks got a government grant. There was a Department of Justice task force, and made public appearances with John Walsh, you know, the John Walsh, whose son Adam was murdered, and helped Brooks gain traction for this idea of VICAP, and testified twice to the U.S. Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Serial Murders, and told about how they traveled obsessively to hide criminal behavior under cover of distance. And at the time that it was believed that they never stopped until they aged out, they got arrested, or they died. But now that's not entirely believed to be true. Some stop just because of things that happened in their life. Some start because of things that happened in their life. They might start again, but not necessarily. Joe D'Angelo, he stopped, the Golden State Killer. And Dennis Rader, BTK. In 1985, VICAP began, they began in 1945, and for 40 years, they've been a huge factor in crime solving. Anne doesn't get enough credit for this. I had no idea. She was proactive and dedicated in getting this started. She became a certified law enforcement instructor. She taught 4-hour serial killer seminars for the FBI. She spoke about women who kill. She spoke about victims' rights. She became an expert on criminal behavior profiling. I think I'm going to stop here because the amount of information I have left, I don't want to be giving you a 10-minute video. I'll keep going here forever and give you a 10-minute video. So I'm going to stop here, and we can all sit and think about VICAP and what a great job Ann Rule did helping VICAP to become a thing. So now it's not required that local police do this, but it's recommended that when they've got a killing, they put all the information to VICAP. VICAP collates and finds patterns. It's very interesting. Okay, I will be back. Thank you very much for watching. Check out Diane Downs' unbelievable YouTube. Slongafoil, slancha.